MENATS. We're here to talk about the MENATS. The MENATS are the newest edition of all the acronyms that we've had to use over the years. There's BAME, of course, the traditional.
Scholar.
Yes.
Youth.
Yukma was an attempt that went wrong.
Jogger.
Went sexual. Anyway, and then we've got MENATS that we've got to deal with today. And before we get into the MENATS, I have to announce this. So this is on the page, which is the career opportunities on lotus.com. It's production manager time. And if you scroll down on the page, you'll find careers and then find this job. Go have a look at it. If you like it, apply. If you don't, don't. Rightio. Moving on. Let's get into it. So this is a policy document that came out. And I know we're all raring to watch more policy documents, my friend.
So MENATS is supposed to be an acronym.
It is indeed.
Okay.
And this policy document over here, this is the Center for Policy Studies. I'm excited. No, I am actually, because it's literally just proving everything we've all been saying for years. I'm not kidding. The central government centers of the think tanks are now like, hey, you know that podcast fella? It turns out the migrants are taking all the houses. And
I mean, I think it's important to note, I was reading through this morning, Callum was as well, we were talking about it, and it really comes across like they've been watching us. I think they might have gold tier subscribers, they might show up on the gold tier Zooms and just lurk. They might mill about in the gold tiers.
So what we're talking about is this here. It says mass immigration not delivering promised economic benefits, says Jen Rick and O'Brien. Duh.
Jen Rick, former immigrations minister for the Tory government.
But not a surprise, not news. I mean, kind of old news. It's not even news anymore, it's old. But if you're wondering, like you mentioned, this is the fella. This is Jen Rick over here. He used to be the immigration minister, and then realized, oopsie poopsie, it's gone a bit wrongsy, and everything's been ruined.
How many years ago was he into the position?
Just a couple. He came in after Liz Truss.
Okay.
Sort of stuck around and then realized, this is bad.
Okay.
I've done a bad job. So I don't have much sympathy for him personally, because it's like, well, you were the guy in charge.
Now, this is like the Tories turning around, looking at the effects of migration and going, oops, did I do that? Did I do that? Oopsie doopsie.
But here's what the party in charge now admits they did, which is detailed in the Telegraph quite nicely. So I thought I'd read some of this. So they say here that migration has failed to drive economic growth. Really? I thought we were all so rich. It says the data was published showing that British consumers are suffering the longest drop in living standards in the G7 as the economy fails to keep up, whilst immigration is at the highest point it's ever been in all of recorded human history. I think unrecorded human history, it's also the highest.
Yeah.
Prehistory was not as high as it is now, 1 million a year crossing over from Doggerland.
I don't think there were that many people on Earth.
Probably not.
Back in the Doggerland days.
Miss Doggerland. They say here, although
Britain's return.
Although Britain's economy rose by 0.1%, really gains. Got to get those economic gains, 0.1% growth across the entire year. The per person basis, it fell 0.8%. This obviously being because you can add lots more people, and that will grow economy as a whole. But obviously, if you've not made more wealth, the wealth is not just being distributed between more people, which means you're worse off.
Yeah, but who cares about people? As long as the GDP goes up?
Yeah.
As long as London's financial district is making a comfortable profit, we're all profiting. No, wait, no, we're not.
I'm not even sure London's financial district is profiting anymore. So they say here, the figures were stark in contrast to the other G7 countries, where GDP per capita rose 1.2%, it fell 0.8% in the UK. To alleviate pressure on housing, the NHS and schools, the CPS said net migration should be capped at just tens of thousands a year, down from the peak 745,000 in 22, which means that I think Carl is actually the only person who's been publicly saying for a while now, just put a cap. Just, okay, once it reaches this figure, every other application for a visa is just, no, sorry.
I'd say
it's the cap.
Personally, tens of thousands, still too many for me. But it would be a lot better than the complete unrestricted flood that we have at the moment.
Would the GDP suffer, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the GDP per capita would go up. So they mention here, of course, that, well, why did they say tens of thousands? And you did the reading here, which is that they've also done the thing we did, which is go through back every single manifesto ever. And they've all said, lower immigration, please. And we voted for them, and then they just didn't. They just upped it. And the Tory government being the ones who initially came to power on the basis of capping it at tens of thousands.
Yeah, in the
this is 2010 policy.
Yeah, well, in the report, they go back to 1992 in the Tory manifesto for 1992 saying we'll put a cap on that migration, we'll make sure that not many more come in.
Lies for years, 20 of them. So they say here, to deliver this, the CPS said that the Home Office, which has proven itself to be too unwieldy to function effectively, it's a great endorsement, and undermined high levels of churn, should be split into a Department for Border Security and a Department for Immigration Control. And the second charge with policing and national security as well. So there we are. That's
I don't necessarily know if that would fix things. That just means more individual departments that over the course of 10 to 20 years can grow and refuse to do their jobs. Just fire everyone at the Home Office.
You're gone, all of you.
We
failed on law, you failed on order, you failed on immigration. Bye.
Yeah, there was, I always reference it, but it's important. There was the Telegraph column letter that came in, I think it was October, November, from a Home Office insider just spilling the beans on everything that goes on in there, saying that most of everybody's time is spent in diversity meetings, talking about how gay they should all be, and then rubber stamping every visa application that comes through. And Suella Braverman would come in and say, please, please, oh please, could we just restrict a little bit of immigration, please? And they would all laugh and say no, and she would say, oh, I'm so sorry for asking, and leave.
And
every single one of those people fired.
One of the weird things would be to see there the amount of money that the people who were talking about the diversity initiatives would get. Because generally speaking, DEI offices are
very well paid,
lucrative,
handsomely compensated.
But if you are a civil servant, how gay should you be? I'm actually kind of interested in what those seminars decided.
They didn't go into detail on that. They just
gay, a little bit more gay. What's the point in that meeting?
Just
it means nothing.
Or do we take more?
That's the point. It's just insane. But let's get this back on screen. So this is the article here, but they also have some lovely graphs. And as you can see, this is post-COVID. So what's the GDP growth looking like? And it's just red. It's just crap. Like it's just been awful, if nothing else, over the last couple of years.
And that was supposed to be the return to normalcy. We'll get the lockdowns ended so that we can return back to normal. The new normal. It sucks.
That's per capita, though. There are people who view it in absolute terms and they don't care.
Well, those people I'm called mad.
Well, in absolute terms, we got that 0.1%. Oh, yeah.
It's a bit gay. Anyway, so let's get on to who's coming, because this is the most interesting bit. And as you can see, the MENATS there. I will be coming to the MENATS in a minute. The MENATS. Minute.
What have
like
you,
that word.
What have you done?
Oh,
there we go. You've destroyed
ruined
the
it.
graph.
Okay. Whatever, it's back. Analysis from the Home Office says that the impact of the shift from EU migration, so before we used to have a lot more EU people coming, now we don't, and for some reason, this wasn't asked for, the Home Office decided what we need is huge amounts of non-EU migration.
Mm-hmm.
So the Home Office did this is their decision, to massively shut down EU migration because of the Brexit vote. That's going to happen. So they decided to massively up non-EU migrants. Now, migrants, they say, from the Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey, aged 25 to 64, were almost twice as likely to be economically inactive as someone born in the UK. And as you can see, they chopped the charts here, and they are called MENATS. That's the new term. So when you're walking around and you notice some MENATS, 40% of them are economically inactive. So you'll be able to determine these things as a reflection of reality, because the data backs up your reflection of reality, if that's what you've seen.
Economic inactivity has in the past been used as a metric to basically smooth over the unemployment rate. So these people, they're not unemployed, they're economically inactive. And a lot of that will mean people who are too sick to be working, which means, judging by this graph that we have here, that we are just importing people too ill to work. For some reason, if you were to take their claims of why they can't work right now seriously.
And if you were to do that, you would also see here that an Australian or a New Zealander is about a fourth as likely to be so cripplingly ill that they can't work, whereas a MENAT, they're just riddled with disease, presumably.
I mean, probably they are, actually.
Or they're just not working because they can't be bothered. I mean, it's just a complete cultural difference here.
Yeah, I mean,
tax forms, or you have a culture in which women are not working, so that will contribute to it. Blah 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 blah.
In other breakdowns, like the one The Economist did for Denmark, they included Pakistanis as a separate category within the MENAT, so it's the MENAPT. So I would assume Middle East is taking in the Pakistanis. So given the marriage culture they have over there, perhaps that explains some of the crippling illness so many of them are suffering from. Evidently,
one of the things to bear in mind here is the lobby power that some groups have.
Mm.
And for instance, they are trying to bargain. They are trying to
The
ask
mobbies go, we can't work. We're
from
so
politicians.
sleepy.
No, they are literally asking for financial support in exchange for political support. And the more this goes on, the more this is going to happen.
And then what will you give me in return? Well, we won't work. I mean, it's just a bad deal.
They won't work, but they will support politically.
Because we've been over this with Pakistan. I mean, I'll keep riding on Pakistan because they deserve it more than anyone. Which is the state of Pakistan has basically done literally nothing for the British states at all the people. In terms of trade, we get nothing out of that. In terms of crime rates, everything else, these mass migration differences, not a net benefit. Not New Zealanders, not EU, Latin American, or anything.
Apparently, Australians and New Zealanders are just coming over here to work so that they can pay for benefits for Pakistanis.
It seems so. Very sad. But also just on foreign policy front, like the Pakistanis have stabbed us in the back more times than anyone can count, no matter how many fingers they've got. And as you can see here, it's just a bad deal. And it goes for other groups. You can go through this. We've been through it many times. If you wanted to import a group of people because you wanted a load of cheap workers who were going to be really productive, you can do this. You can look at the data and find out. And as you can see here, the groups that are the best production are Southeast Asia there, rest of Europe, North America, Latin America, EU, Australia, and New Zealand. They're the most economically active. And those who at least are MENAT, South Asia, East Asia, rest of Oceania, Caribbean, Central Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. Of course, this isn't the end all of all data. You then go into how much are they earning compared to just economic activity. But the same trend is the case because, as we mentioned before, I mean, like, what is it? East Asia over here. So the Chinese are rated quite high on productivity. But when you look into the crime rates and then the, income, like the Chinese score incredibly high. So they're probably more economically inactive because they couldn't afford to be. Like, literally, we just earn more. Get stuffed.
Whereas I doubt that's going to be the case for the MENATS, though.
The MENATS, not so much. But they say here...
And that's for men aged 25 to 64.
Working age men, yeah.
Okay.
Not retirees. So they say here, Spanish migrants, for example, typically earn around 40% more than migrants from Pakistan or Bangladesh. In the same country, same job market, I'm going to say it, same 24 hours in the day. While migrants from countries such as Canada, Singapore, and Australia paid between 4 to 9 times as much income tax as migrants from Somalia or Pakistan. So a migrant from Australia, in tax terms, is worth 9 Pakistanis. And they take up a ninth of the housing, a ninth of the supply of goods, and in return you get 9 times the income in terms of taxation there.
And also, and this might be a shock to some people, Aussies and New Zealanders are already basically British, so there's not really much to worry about culture-wise there.
Yeah, no rise in female genital mutilation. But I remembered this scene from Have I Got News For You. You ever used to watch that show?
I used to flick past it.
Yeah. Well, used to be like some funny moments, but overall, yeah. Because this is a scene, I think this is 9 years ago, this video was uploaded. I can't remember when it was out. But this was during the Brexit debate. And obviously at the time, because they just couldn't hide how much they hated us, the mainstream media would run stuff like this, where it's like, look at the UK native, he's fat, has no university degree, low education, versus Eastern European, of course. The height of education and sophistication. But then it goes on with some others as well. So as you can see here, this is them making fun of the fact that they're inferior. Western Europeans, higher level of university degree, higher level of education. And it's like, okay, whatever. And then I think next to it, they have non-European, which is represented by a Mongolian for some reason, which is something. Go on, pick it back up. Put it down. God damn it. Oh, wait, yeah. Is he gonna? Oh no, I didn't get the timestamp.
Oh, there you go.
There we are. No! Oh, no! Whatever. The point being that the TV show would run at the time, this kind of crap, where just constantly non-Europeans, Eastern European, Western European, they're all better than you, native British.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically grog, whereas they are all big-brained. You need them to survive.
Is this all based off? I assume this is all based off of information for these ethnic groups within the UK.
Yes.
Which at the time had much harsher selection pressures, even with the mass migration that we were experiencing at the time.
But even then, I'm not sure I even trust these numbers back then.
No, of course.
I think this is just typical Westminster propaganda, where it's like, everything is fine, stop questioning anything. It's like, but it's ruining my life. I can't afford a house. Ever. I feel like that's more important, but
Well, the pattern of this propaganda is to portray everything that is in the interest of the elite, let's say, as being in the interest of the people.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that got me about the MENATS, though, is also the millers. We were joking about this morning because Drutker has noted many times some world-class milling in this photo, for example. As he writes, in rare sighting of commando prone position milling.
Yeah, I was going to say, normally you don't see them just lying prone on their bellies like that. It's quite impressive. He's turtling almost.
But these are some fellas who are milling, and I don't understand milling. Are you a miller?
No, typically I'm doing things with my day.
What about you, Stelios? Do you mill?
What the hell are they doing?
That's the question.
It's very confusing.
If you go to any train station in and around the Greater London area, you will be confronted with this level of milling.
I see what's going on here.
You know, they're actually
being street informers, informants or something.
Not even that. It's just
they hear the word in the street and they help the police.
Are you
somehow?
This is Sherlock's homeless network. All right. Are you sure they're not forming some kind of miniature symposium? They're actually deep in pondering.
Yeah, they're just waiting for the Warhammer shop to open.
Oh, Carl's there. Oh, all right. This is Carl's extended family.
No, I think it's as Drutker points out. Milling Gear Solid. There's also a game you can play, Milling Around, a spotter's guide that's been published if you wish to enjoy a spot of milling and figuring out who's milling, what type of millers they are, of course.
Oh, the sellers. You see plenty of those with their... oh, no. Whoever this gentleman is. He's not milling. The sellers with their definitely legitimate Gucci bags and branded T-shirts. You get a lot of sellers outside of gigs that you go to where it's like, oh, on the inside of the venue, you can get this shirt for £45. Get this totally legitimate T-shirt for a tenner instead.
So basically, milling is what you do when you do nothing.
Milling about, doing bugger all.
Okay.
And I always wonder, because you do see people milling, and I always want to just... Don't you have a home to go to, or video games to play, or wives to have sex with?
The street is my home.
Yeah, it's just milling, just constant milling. And it turns out if you're that economically inactive as a group, such as the MENATS, you can afford to mill. But we'll get back to the article, because there's some more stuff in here that's just amazing. So they say, the report said the impact was particularly acute in housing. Net migration now accounted for 89% of the 1.3 million increase in the housing deficit. So literally there are there's a myriad of reasons why you can't afford a house, but 89% of that reason is immigration.
Almost the entire problem. I wonder if anybody in this room, perhaps, has been banging that drum for a few years.
I would never bully Tom Harwood for good fun. That's never happened.
Oh, what's that? It's 9 o'clock in the morning. Time to bully Harwood.
I do actually get up and bully Tom Harwood as a sport at this point. For YouTube, I'm joking, of course. It's just that Tom Harwood believes that we just need to build more houses and that will solve everything. Whereas now we know 90% of the shortfall is because of immigration. One issue solution to the entire question there, which is just, it's immigration. It's nothing else. You know what? I will play the damn stupid meme. Why not? This is from the old days.
Housing and wages had tracked each other. The cost of housing and the growth in earnings tracked each other until the late 1990s, and then something happened.
We're still yet to know.
And house prices just spiraled out of control.
Expected north there.
Unless we are building more than 300,000 homes a year, unless we are actually keeping pace with demand, and right up until the early, or indeed the late 1990s, house price growth tracked wage growth. And then something happened at the end of the 1990s.
But we're still unsure.
Well, no, we're not actually, because we have an official government report telling us exactly what the problem is.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah. It's just 90% of the problem is that.
And it says
just that
300,000 houses per year target is based off of the assumption that we only have 170,000 net migrants in the country every year.
And we also never reach the target, ever.
Yeah.
Not even during the post-war period did we build up many houses.
And also there was another Telegraph article. I don't know if you included it, but it was. Let me see if I can find the one that I sent to you, which was talking about how in February the government had basically bought out like 16,000 homes purely
for millers.
Yeah, for millers, for MENATS and millers.
The men who mill. Right.
Houses for people who don't reside in them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Minutes.
So to be fair, you should just build tents on street corners for the millers, and that would do them fine.
Oh, you know what? I love a big homeless tent factory. That's
not that I'm suggesting that. I'm just saying if you want to shore up some of the housing costs.
But they say here it goes further than just buying a house. Obviously, they say pressure has also been added to the rental markets as well as affecting home ownership. For example, 67% of privately rented households in London are headed by someone born overseas. 67% of all rented housing in London is from someone who was born overseas. 67% of the market is taken up by immigrants who want access to the British economy. Okay? 33% of new social housing, so these are new, there's a very small amount being built, but the amount that is even being built, 33%, a third of it, goes to people who are not born here. Never mind the already huge amount of stock that's already been taken by people who are not born here. That's the new ones as well. I mean, it's just unbelievable the damage it does to people's wealth, because the number one way of building wealth is your income. This is the only way people have ever built income unless you have some massive inheritance or something like that. You live below your means, you save up, and then you gain capital over time, and then you use that capital to do things like start a business or whatever else, right? That avenue has just been closed off since the 1990s. Just if you want to save money, well, I'm sorry, but your rent is just going to keep going up at a ridiculous rate that doesn't match your wages. Never mind the fact of owning a house, you don't have to rent and burn that money every month. That avenue of wealth creation for the natives just got turned off. I mean, the unrepairable damage that has done just for decades is going to be, well, it already is unbelievable. But the fella here, Mr. Jenrick, he says that he blames the Tory government for liberalising immigration after Britain voted to take control of its borders, leaving the EU. Do we know who the immigration minister was after Brexit? Do we have any idea?
Renjick?
Jenrick. I think it's Jenrick. It's this guy. You were the immigration minister after Liz Truss. You could have stopped these things and you just did nothing, so I'm sorry. He says in here, despite the rhetoric of highly selective systems, the post-2021 system continues to allow a large number of people to come here who are either not working or working in very low-wage jobs. Out of net migration of 2 million non-EU nationals over the last 5 years, 15% principally came here to work. 85% didn't come to work. That's not people on visas for tourism. That's people who come here for a long stay, proper settlement. 85% are not here to work. Despite a 6.6% increase in the UK's population between 2011 and 2021, the number of GP surgeries increased 4% in the same period. The amount of electricity the UK produces, it fell by 14%. The amount of electricity we can produce as a nation has gone down whilst the population has massively increased. There is no such thing as a low electricity rich nation. This is just a truism of economics. I'm sorry, but that's also just a huge thing to keep in mind. Remember when we did Mao's Great Famine?
Yep.
And you would read about coal supplies running out and things like this. Like, that's how I feel reading this.
Well, yeah, because I was actually reading an article about South Africa right before we came on, and it was talking about rolling blackouts and electrical cuts across the country, and particularly in larger cities like Johannesburg, over the past few years. And if I hadn't read the part about the failure to generate electricity, the fact that it fell, and I see that in the future. If this is where we're heading, if this trend doesn't reverse, even if, as I suspect, the elites do hate the native population of Britain to a certain level and want to punish us for some unknown reason, simply because they're on the top and they think it's funny to, I don't know, pull legs off of spiders and burn ants to death with magnifying glass in the sun, and that's how they see us. There comes a point where it will affect them. It will come to them when they look out the window and go, why isn't any of the electric working?
You can't get a GP appointment.
The problem with this is, though, that they are thinking in a very short-term manner, and it's not exactly obvious that they don't understand it already, but maybe they're hoping that this is going to happen when they are not going to suffer the consequences.
I think they will. Well, because we can see it'll bankrupt the country if nothing else. So I have to end this off because we're out of time, basically.
Of course.
But here's Harry's thread on it, where he's got a bunch of graphs. And the reason I'm picking on the MENATS, not only because of the ridiculous level of economic inactivity, which is not naturally occurring, but obviously it's been found in other places. So as you mentioned here, here's the Denmark graph, in which they looked at net tax paying per year of age. And obviously, if you're Danish, you pay taxes between sort of 20-something. You're a net contributor. Western European immigrants, basically the same. And then MENATS, or MENAPS, as they put it, because they put Pakistanis as a separate group, never, not once, not 1 year of life are the group living in Denmark found to have been contributing to the tax system. Only a net economic drain. The kind of economic drain you would usually get from a disabled person or women. It's the idea that you don't end up paying into it because you're not one of the high percentage earners. And then, as you pushed, Aussies and New Zealanders are the ones keeping the UK from collapse in some respect there. So,
Yes, thank you.
What's with the bear logo in the background there, Harry?
I didn't notice that. I didn't know what that was until somebody quoted it and said, "Did you do this on purpose?" And I said, "Well, clearly Australians are all gay."
Well, there we are. Thank you to Australian viewers. Thank you for paying taxes, because the MENATS certainly aren't. Let's move on.
Seriously, is that an actual flag behind it? Because
That's the bear flag.
What is the
It's
bear?
for really hairy gay guys. If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as Lads Hour, this episode on the Fallout universe. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.